Had some big high-quality polls come out over the weekend, giving us a snapshot of where the race stands heading into, of course, tomorrow's high-stakes debate. Let's take a look at Washington Post ABC poll. Again, this is a high-quality poll, shows Biden maintaining a 10-point lead. Basically, nothing has changed since July 2019. You can see a little bit of the demographics here. Won't be surprising for you to learn that there's a huge gender gap between these two candidates in how they're performing. Biden is plus 31 with female voters. Trump is plus 13 with men. If you look at suburban women and suburban men even, Biden plus 32 with suburban women, but Trump plus 22 with suburban men. Biden plus 41 with white college women, and Trump narrowly winning white non-college women. And I do think that that gender gap is one of the more interesting and more significant divides that actually doesn't get talked about a lot. We talk a lot about the education differences, the geographic differences, the racial differences, but maybe the biggest divide here is along gender lines.
No, exactly. I think the gender gap is it's huge whenever you look at it. But it's also funny because even within that, you can largely see the same story, which is same thing. Trump is winning amongst non-college educated voters. He actually has far less of a lead amongst non-college educated white women than he does amongst non-college educated people in general. So you can actually see that even within that, there is a lot of ground that you can be made up. And the gender gap there is pretty wild. I mean, this I thought was really fascinating, just comparing the ABC WAPO poll to the 2016 exit polls, where I think this is an even bigger story here, which is that Clinton won political moderates by 12. Biden is leading them by 47. Now, Clinton won independent women by 4. Biden is leading them by 57. And Trump won whites by 20 points. He's now at plus 6. So you can, again, see that there are groups where Trump and Biden might be ahead. I mean, you could say, like, oh, Clinton won moderates. And people are like, yeah, okay. But, like, the degree through which you win moderates, for Trump, the degree through which you win white voters and non-college educated white voters matters dramatically, because that's actually who might be able to put you over the edge.
Yeah, and the place where he's made gains, he's actually made, and this is something we've been covering here, his gains have come among white voters of all stripes. And yes, President Trump has maintained his lead among white non-college educated voters, but Biden has made up ground even there, which has dramatic implications for what the most likely victory path would be for him through the Electoral College. So those industrial Midwestern states that Trump was able to flip last time around, the blue wall states, those look like the most likely to flip back to Biden versus the Sun Belt approach, where you have higher minority concentrations. If he was outperforming Hillary there, then you might think that the Sun Belt approach would be best. Now, look, that's not to say, look, Arizona is very much in range. Florida is basically a jump ball. Even Texas is a possibility if things sort of bounce Biden's way here down the home stretch. But if you were just to bet on what the best and most likely path for him based on the demographic shifts that we've seen, it would be through the industrial Midwest, where you have larger white populations, where you have older populations as well. Of course, Sunbelt has older populations too, but his softening support among Latinos is a problem for him on that path. We also had a New York Times Siena poll overall, which shows a very similar picture, frankly, of Biden up 8 points. And again, what's different this time around versus with Hillary is that he is at or near 50 in a lot of these polls. Hillary never was getting to 50 basically in any of these polls. One of the interesting demographic breakouts that we thought here sort of stood out to us was along age lines, if you can throw that up. So Biden is winning every single age group except for 45 to 64-year-olds. So kind of like the Gen X range, even a little like younger than Boomer are the ones that are actually going for Trump. And the big shift has, of course, come among seniors, a group that Trump did very well among last time, won that demographic overall because of their concerns about coronavirus, because Trump has been such a failure in managing that, in signaling even to them that he's really interested in trying to keep them safe rather than sort of dismissing or downplaying the loss of lives among our elders, has really been an issue for him here.
I mean,
and so while the top line is not that different, you see all these all these shifts that are just enough to put Biden in a relatively commanding position.
That's what I was really going to highlight, which is that that senior number should be inverted. And it should basically be a scaled down, as in you should have much more support among seniors, then Gen X, then you go to the millennials. It shouldn't be this way, which is almost like a zigzag, where the only thing that really you're winning amongst is the Gen X. And again, this goes to show where coronavirus, the polls turned immediately against him. We saw it so dramatically after coronavirus, and I think it was already by April, we could see in the data just how dramatic the shift from boomers to away from Trump to Biden became. And now that's become a little bit less, but it's still pronounced enough that Biden is winning amongst people who are age 65 and over, largely because of the pandemic. And there's nothing you can really do at this point, I think, in order to win those people back, which is a huge problem for Trump. Now, if you look a little bit more within this New York Times poll, this is where you and I, really saw some stuff which is incredibly troubling. Let's throw it up there on the screen. I mean, a full 40% of Americans say that America is too divided for the political system to work. Get this, only 54% said that the country's political system could still address its problems. Wow. So you have a slight majority of your citizens who are like, yeah, this political system, that'll work. Yeah. Only 30% of the country said the country would, quote, remain prosperous and democratic no matter who won. So 3 in 5 are basically, they're basically saying they have no faith that America will be a prosperous nation regardless of the outcome. Yeah. When you breed this level of apathy within American society, it's really bad. I mean, same thing on, Biden has sold himself as the calming candidate. Voters are pretty much split on whether Biden is going to be a calming force or not, because they don't see it as a Trump-led issue or a Biden-led issue. They see it as systemic.
Right. Yeah. 3 in 5 voters saying that the 2020 election will decide whether the United States will remain a prosperous democracy or not. Only 30% said that the country would remain prosperous and democratic no matter who won. They go on to say that perspective, this was not like a partisan thing. Every single demographic, regional, generational, ideological lines, a majority of every single subgroup said that the country's future as a thriving democracy was at stake in this election, which is part of why I certainly have been so nervous heading into Election Day about just how people are going to process the results of this election, regardless of what is going to happen. Because if you literally think the future of America as a democracy and a prosperous democracy is on the line, that can lead to a very ugly, a very ugly place when people think that the stakes are that existential. And that is, of course, reflected in this polling. So you brought up, yes, people are split over whether Biden is going to make anything better. They are not split over whether Trump is going to make things better in the second term. Only 17% said that the country's divisions would ease if there was another Trump victory, compared with 50% who said they would absolutely get worse. So, when you're looking at this, that's part of the thing is when he came into office, back in 2016, people were sick and tired of what was going on, and they actually wanted someone to upend the whole system. They wanted kind of a chaos agent. Now they're like,
given the
we were good on the chaos front. We've got enough ambient chaos with everything else that's going on, which is, I think, why, not only is Biden winning, but of course the strength with seniors. The last thought I had on the age breakdown there, if we can just throw that G1E, the age New York Times Siena poll back up on the screen. Those 45 to 64-year-olds, those are also people who would be at their prime earning years. So it also makes sense in terms of the view of the shutdown. Right. I bet if you were to poll that demographic group, you would also find them most opposed to the economic lockdowns and the shutdowns that have impacted people economically, because these are people who are in their prime earning years who are trying to, build up their accounts so that they can afford to retire at some point in their lives. And so it kind of makes sense from that perspective as well.
It really does. It's just so interesting looking at the breakdowns. Look, only 30-something days until the election now. People are voting. A lot of people have already voted and requesting ballots and so much more. They don't have a lot more time to turn things around here, so it's not looking good for Trump.
Not today, but you never know. All right, we're going to have more Rising for you after this.